everybody, and welcome to Outlawed Thoughts episode 50, 50th episode. Here with Kareem Mays as always, and we're talking about a bunch of random stuff tonight. Not really super structured. In fact, I'll probably let Kareem toss in a bunch of topics because don't have a ton of stuff planned. But tonight is the 50th episode. This has been about a year the channel's been active and like uploading at this point or so. I think our first live stream I can actually look here and see was just over a year ago. So just over a year ago was when the first episode was up, and just shortly thereafter was when Kareem joined the show. Around episode, I believe you joined on episode 5. So that was the beginning of the
anarchy.
The shit show. But yeah, so it's about a year the show's been going on. Obviously, the channel doesn't have a ton of traction. And that is what it is. That's kind of how it works with live streaming, especially in podcast, especially when you talk about sort of everything. We don't really have a structure, and so this show isn't about trying to become like famous and that kind of thing. And but I will say that I was happy with I got to release the thing I'd been working on for a while. I know I've been talking about on here. I released the video on Joe Vogler, the life and assassination of Joe Vogler, which is the name of it. I knew what I was going to call it about 3 months ago, but I hadn't put that out anywhere, and I didn't say that online because I wanted to be sort of a surprise. But I did upload that. It got up to 600 views, which is pretty good for the channel. I thought that was good for a video. It's about 45 minutes long, just a little bit under that. Outlawed Thoughts applies for ARP. Yeah. So I definitely, if you have not seen it, go watch it. Go check it out. I worked on that for a long time, and I've got the next story that I'm covering. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I thought that would be fun because it's another person dead, of course, under mysterious circumstances. So, or allegedly dead. This is a weird case where we don't even know if the person's actually dead.
Waiting.
I'm here. Sorry, that was my fault. Okay, so I don't know. There's not a ton of news stories that I saw today that I was interested in. There was a little bit of Kanye stuff I saw. A little bit of stuff to do with a metal detectorist suing the FBI that I saw that was pretty interesting. So we'll go over that stuff. I did want to talk a little bit about the Vogler thing, future videos, stuff like that. But are there any topics or anything you've seen interest you recently? I don't know if it's on your end, but it sounds like a fan or something going.
Yeah, I think my computer's being a little...
Oh, it's just running hot. Okay.
Just running hot. So sorry about that.
There's nothing we can do about that.
That I can mute out for. No, I saw your Joe Vogler documentary. I was talking to people at a convention about, like, my boy released this doco. Go check it out. I think it was really, really well done. Especially from the perspective you were just working on it yourself. So for a one-man documentary, you really kicked it out of the park. In other news, I believe one of our old co-hosts is running for something. Josh said CD is running for some stuff, so that should be good.
Yes.
About that,
I believe Josh Halofka, the other co-host from here, the past co-host, is also running.
Yeah, running for some stuff. So yeah,
I believe Josh Halofka is running for chair of the Libertarian Party of Florida, and then CD is running for vice chair.
Correct.
Right.
So that's pretty exciting. I don't know if you're still going to Florida, if you're staying in Alaska, but I think that's pretty.
Well, Eventually, the plan is to move to Florida when the sale of this hotel goes through, which I think should be done by the end of this summer. I planned on running for a position over there eventually, or doing something politically in Florida because it seems like an interesting place to get involved with stuff. And moving somewhere is definitely high up on my list just from financial stuff. It's really expensive to live in Alaska. People don't really think about that, but it's getting more expensive because more fucking people are ruining the state. So
There you
it's
go.
only getting more difficult. So
Yeah.
um,
Other than that, some interesting stuff that did happen. There's Matt Hancock got caught. I guess he's part of the UK government. If you want me to do that, saying when do we deploy the next variant to scare? We need to frighten everybody with the new strain. So
right. Yeah,
that
I
was
saw that. We can. I will try to bring up a story on that.
also, I don't know. I don't think we got together that, but they finally admitted, for whatever reason, I think it's to distract you. They finally admitted the lab leak theory isn't a theory. I mean, and
Right. Yeah.
why that's important is everybody got sent. They're like, oh my god, tinfoil hat, this, that. I'm like, it came from a lab. They're like, there's no way that could have happened. It evolved in nature. I'm like, what? Like this? That makes no sense. Like the makeup of this thing was engineered by some, and then it's a little bit insane now that they're just like, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So it's very clear they control the narrative. Other than that, I saw Michael Malice talking about the white pill. I definitely take the white pill. And Alex Stein has
I
like this.
think I disagree in general with Malice on that point.
Okay.
I
Bring it
I, I, I disagree with him on that, and for a few different reasons. But
Oh,
there's and I haven't read the book yet, so I don't want to like formally reply to what he said. But or what the ideas of the book are, but just the concept of the white pill in general, the fact that we should be under the belief that this stuff isn't going to be the thing that causes complete and utter breakdown, I think is the wrong thing to believe. Um, and I think that it makes it very hard to fix the problems we have um, if you believe that it's all going to be all right. It's all going to be okay. Because that's not the case. We're gonna die in a fiery inferno of Armageddon if we don't fix these things.
yeah. I
I
mean,
wanna
I'm
I wanna
not going
say
that far. I'm not like I'm actually white pilled myself. I don't
uh,
think the elites are all that smart. To be fair, they very sloppy. Like the dude got caught like texting. Like the elites are getting extremely sloppy. Like
so
I like
I wanna say to anybody who is in the chat, because I did put the tweet out. The One of the last tweets that I put out on my account before the tweet that says we are going live, I'll bring it up on screen here. If you go to that tweet, you can click the link and join the show and come in
Mhm.
here with face cam or just your voice. You don't have to have your webcam up. But I figured since it's the 50th episode, we'd have a little fun. And so I figured that'd be the fun way to do it is just let people in the chat join in
Yeah, just
person if
join
they
up.
want to.
Yeah.
And I'll bring the thing up here. And I actually can drop this link in chat, I suppose.
Can Uncle Ted join?
But I know some people aren't going to be home or aren't going to be wanting to go online, and that's fine. Um, you're perfectly okay to do your own thing. But if you do want to join, this is how you can do it. And I will go ahead and drop this in the link for YouTube as well. So it'll be there too. There you
Can I invite my wife's boyfriend, Don Terrius?
go.
This is my wife's boyfriend, Don Terrius. Alex Stein got in some hot water for his new show. That's something we could talk about. I saw
I
Alex
saw
Stein.
Alex Stein grill Alan Dershowitz alive. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Alex Stein had Dershowitz on, and yeah, he brought him right to the ovens. It was real fucking. It was. He took him right back to his heritage.
That's
I'm
fucked up.
I'm allowed to make that joke, but no, yeah, it was fucking brutal because Dershowitz is a slime ball. That guy was all wrapped up in the Epstein stuff, and then also was the guy that was protecting him in the courts and stuff as his lawyer. I don't really get on anybody for protecting somebody for being a lawyer, but he was obviously involved with more than just being his legal counsel. Um, yeah, I
Uh,
don't know. I don't know either. How did Dershowitz get baited into that trap? I think it was just size. I think Alex probably used the Blaze, connections that he has now, and those kind of connections to get in there.
it was his wife's boyfriend, Don Terrius.
Oh, okay, cool. Looks like Rise of Liberty will jump in. Cool.
Hey, Rise of Liberty. But yeah, no, I saw he had a new show, and I'm like, oh boy, Alex Stein has a new show, and we'll watch it. So that's something we can definitely
It's
talk
really
about.
unique. It's kind of a fever dream, but it's a really cool kind of layout the way he does it. He does like a monologue
Mhm.
and then followed by guests, but the guests are sometimes jokes. It's very reminiscent of old school variety late night, and
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of that. It
you know
reminds
what
me
it
of like
reminds
the
me
old
of?
days.
Like kind of like I like him and Jimmy Dore's show because Jimmy will bring on people like, oh, Senator Romney, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good, and then he'll just make him say ridiculous.
Exactly. This is exactly what I believe he suspected. He probably thought he was walking into friendly territory, bunch of neocons, pat him on the ass and give him a hello. And instead, he walked head first into that. We also had Russell Brand going on um, Bill Maher and absolutely demolishing the MSNBC while being on there,
Mhm.
dropping bombs. So that was pretty cool.
Actually,
Um,
I hate to say,
he also just heard the name Stein and thought he'd be safe. That is the obvious joke, and I missed it, but that's so fucking great. He's like,
here
this is
comes
one
the
of my fellow travelers.
yeah, he's part of the club. Um, that doesn't sound weird. I know Bill Maher on the left. There's a few people like I think that still have retained sanity. Not much, but I like Jimmy Dore. I do like Bill Maher still because my dad's kind of an old school Democrat, and he was watching Bill Maher, and that's the first time I saw Ron Paul. So I'm like, okay,
I saw Ron Paul on Bill Maher at a very young age. It
I
was
did
one of the
too.
first times I saw him. It would have been the other one was Colbert. Colbert had Ron Paul on to talk about the gold standard when I was a kid, and my
Mhm.
grandmother was a huge Colbert fan of his old show, not the new stuff. She doesn't like the new, but liked his other stuff, and so I got introduced to Ron on that show because he was on there to talk about the gold standard. So that was cool. It was yeah, that was back in a sweet spot when they could still make shows like that. But yeah, I think I was very taken back by the layout of his new show. I've been enjoying it because it reminds me so much of like old variety comedy TV, old late night. And we need that because late night now sucks. So I think Alex Stein is definitely a good replacement for somebody like Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, those kind of talking head people. He seems to do a better
Yeah.
job than them.
What's
Uh,
funny is I've never looked at Alex Stein's politics. I don't really. I mean, I can guess what it is somewhat, but
well, he seems sort of more on the libertarian side from what I understand, but it's not as a little more Fint City on some issues. But
you
I
want to
haven't.
bring up clips of the Alan Dershowitz.
We can, yeah, we can watch it. I was gonna maybe wait for Rise of Liberty to hop in, and we'll
Okay,
show him that.
drove him through the oven. I'm like, wow.
Sorry, I'm just doing drugs, everybody.
Owen Schroyer also brought up I think, Tex. I'm not saying Texas is seceding. I'm just
Texas is
saying,
full of pussies.
I mean,
You know what happens if you cut Alaska in half? Texas becomes the third largest state.
Okay. The papers were officially filed for Texit to begin. So
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think Texas's government is full of pansies and liberals wearing red coats, and they'll find that falls flat on its face. Unfortunately, I wish it wouldn't, but that is, I think, the reality. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think uh, any group of people that is using secession as a media cudgel versus an actual political tool is making a mistake, and that's what I think the Texas representatives are doing in this case. They're attempting to turn secession into a media talking point to get them kudo points or to use as a
I
bargaining
mean,
chip.
I don't particularly like that, but it gets people talking about it. Like even if it doesn't happen this time, it's like, oh well, what do you think about splitting stuff up? Well, we could try. I never thought of it like that. I'm not saying it's like a magic
No.
way to fix society, but it gets the conversation started.
So we can we'll check out this Matt Hancock tweet that got, or message that got leaked here. I've got that pulled up.
Yeah, that was funny. Like, this is why I am white pilled. Here's why I'm white pilled, because they are so sloppy. Like, okay, fine, they're elites, but what are they really elite? They have a bunch of Federal Reserve notes, and they're psychopaths, and they're stupid. Like, maybe they're not all stupid, but
Tell Kareem to stop trying to get me to spar him while I'm high before I do a comedy show.
Adam Nutter's a bitch. I tell better jokes than he does.
What? Is this a beef I didn't know about? What the fuck?
I'm trying to tell jokes, and he's like, "Oh, it's a long. You're not doing a punchline the way I want it to. It's too long."
The whoopee defense.
I'm doing a setup, man, and setups can take a long time.
Greg Abbott is as useless from the neck up as he is from the waist.
I challenge Adam Nutter to a comedy battle. I'll defeat him.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I didn't know there was history.
There isn't history. I was at the convention and I kept saying, "Hey, I'll open up for you." And I kept trying to tell jokes. And then
oh, God.
Adam's like, "Oh." I even told the one joke.
His setups were 67 minutes. It sounds like an autistic libertarian to me, Adam. I think that's the MO here.
Yeah, it's autismo comedy.
It's autismo comedy. Oh, God.
Me and Josh had a conversation about that. It was funny. He's like, people will come up and be like, "All right, I want to decriminalize everything." He's like, "No, stop. This is all." It's like, "No, black tar heroin should be legal."
All right, so this is Lawrence Fox tweeted this out. People dying alone in hospital, unable to say their last goodbyes. Children education decimated. Increases in suicide and domestic violence. A destroyed economy. Whilst this cockroach gloats about deploying a new variant. At Matt Hancock should be tried for treason. And this is the leaked message here. Sounds like Sadiq is lining up to being Birmingham. Yep, Tony's MPs also furious already about the prospect. MOS leader trying to warn us off too. Moss leader trying to warn us off too. Rather than doing too much forward signaling, we can roll pitch with the new strain. And then these are the highlighted messages here. We frighten the pants off everyone with the new strain, but the complication with the Brexit is taking the top line. And then Damon Poole responds, "Yep, that's what will get proper behavior change." And then Matt responds with, when do we deploy the new variant? So this ponders some questions here. When do we release the new variant? Like, why is this guy asking that? When does the new variant drop? like,
Yeah. After a
when's
new
when's
war,
this new fire hit iTunes? Like, I mean,
can someone like tell him like, hey, can you like finish your fake war in Ukraine before you do like the next video? Here's my thing. This is why I probably am white pill, because I'm seeing these are the so-called elites, and they're so sloppy and incompetent. Like I mean, this guy's just a psychopath.
I've been reading about what JC is referencing here recently, and it's interesting to me. I'm
Germ burst theory.
firmly in the camp that germ theory is a hoax, so none of this shocks me. Yeah, germ theory is an interesting topic. I've been reading about this recently. It's weird because there was these scientists like in the 20s and 30s that had made all these claims about being able to cure so much stuff like cancer and all these different things. And they had some decent proof that they did it. And then all of those people never, like, their lives were just destroyed uh, by the state or other businesses and things around them. And it makes me think, like, yeah, it's very possible that a lot of this stuff is fake and can just be explained away by, well, we didn't know at the time that science told us it was true or false or whatever, and it's like, I don't believe any of it. Like, I was talking recently about that, like how much of the media we think is like completely fake, and I literally think 100% of it. And
I
people think
think
I'm crazy for that
I
sometimes,
think
but
it's I think there's some factual stuff, but it's not truthful. Like I can say,
well,
okay,
no. So what I mean more of this is like, and this is what I'll say is like, I I have the belief that like we know these people at Twitter were sat down with by the feds, right?
yeah,
We know that
yes,
you can be a high level actor and you can
hmm
get that same treatment. You could be a high level writer and get that same treatment. You could be a journalist and get that same treatment. You could touch on something and the government decides to come along and say, well, you touched on this thing, so now we have to sit down and have a talk, right? Well, okay, I assume that's happened with people in Hollywood, right? And I assume that if that's happening to the people in Hollywood, and it's going to happen to the people at the top. So it's going to be the people who own these companies, right? So the owners of things like Warner Brothers, the decision makers in Disney, the decision makers in these media companies. Well, it just so happens all those media companies also own all the news media companies. And the news media companies, what if they're getting sat down in the exact same way? Like,
they are.
what is to say that these news media personnel are not literally getting their news stories fed to them the exact same way Twitter employees were
Oh, they are.
behind the
They are.
scenes as to what, accounts to ban? And so if that's the case, then all of the media is a facade. It's entirely
It
fake.
is.
It also explains the cultural movement that has happened in the last 5 or so years, where we have watched the viewership of public media, public access media, and from cable news and from all these different things, even local news, things like that, have gone through the shitter, have completely dropped through the floor. Uh, and at the same time that has happened, we've seen YouTube and individual news providers like, not to toot our own horn, but even shows like this in the future, or things like Tim Pool, things like Joe Rogan, things like Dave Smith's show, Jimmy Dore, who you mentioned previously, Shane Hazel's show, Joshua Smith's show. All of these shows, any show that tangentially mentions news media is mentioning current events
Mhm.
and isn't using the news. See, this is the thing. If you can do a show, and this is what I think we are moving more into, where we don't need to bring up stories, We don't need to bring up the link. We can simply talk about what's happening in the world from our own perspectives, because I think that that is actually better at the end of the day. So I'll read through a news story, but I don't want to linger on it. I think that's important. And that's because I think people want the opinion of the people they're listening to, because they don't trust the media, because they understand that these things are companies and are the government making these decisions behind closed doors. So the only way you can get legitimate news is by going to somebody who's just a guy, you know, and asking questions. So it's a weird world to live in.
Yeah, it's a weird, but to me, it naturally evolves. Like initially, the news was done by newspaper. Then you had Walter Cronkite, and he actually wasn't bad from what I understood. He just told you here's what happens and let you decide. But he was just one outlet, and literally, you had that one outlet, and even though he was truthful, I think to the best of his ability, you had to decide, okay, well, he's truthful or not, it was correct, and where are we going to go from here? Then it evolved, and you had all these media companies, and I will say the mainstream media, I think, was useful in the Vietnam era of exposing some things going on. That being said, it's turned into a complete shit show. I think the next really big wave of that is just people having their own shows. There's so many shows, they're
Right.
doing well. I'm not a fan of the Daily Wire, but like they're even competing. There's a lot of libertarians. Shane Hazel's competing. Other people are competing, and we'll have to see. Tim Pool's
Mm-hmm.
also, pretty popular. So is Luke. And I think that's the future of it.
Yeah.
Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Radowski for We Are Change, and man, oh man, we have a lot of crazy stories. That's what I think is the future. Because people, I'm not saying there's no such thing as unbiased media. Everybody is a bias, but there is a such thing as uncompromised media. Like, no, like people who just run off donations. At least they want to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, I think you have a big portion of the populace that just wants to believe what they want to believe and doesn't really matter what anybody's
yeah.
doing or saying, which sucks. But yeah, we'll look at JC's chats here. Look up Andrew Kaufman. Gerson therapy, they were bringing back late stage cancer patients with high dose vitamin 4. What is that? Vitamin V? What am I missing something? They were clearly documenting records of doctors curing cancer patients, yet chemotherapy, which has a horrible track record, is considered the default and only serious cancer treatment. Yeah, that's the thing, is chemo is branded as being a cure to cancer, but it's not. Even if you go through chemotherapy and you get to the end and it shrinks your cancer down to the point where it's gone or undetectable, they even tell you that your cancer will likely come back within 5 years. So this is because chemotherapy is a crock of shit. Um, I have a video that we could watch tonight, but it's sort of long to react to. But it's like 12 minutes by True Stream Media, and they went over this guy who in the 20s had built a very large microscope, bigger than anybody else at the time had, and he was like a scientist, and he claimed that you could zap viruses and germs and things like that with these rays, or sonic rays of sound vibration, and that would cure cancer. And he did the treatments on like 19 people, and out of the 19, 14 of them were cured. And there's a TED talk that they tie into that video where it goes through this guy just a few years ago who's talking about sound waves curing cancer. And it's like, so this isn't new science. Like, you knew about this in the 20s, but again, chemotherapy makes everybody a lot of money. IV intravenous fluid. Okay, gotcha. Uh yeah, so I think a lot of that is it's wonky. I think the way we look at diseases is often just wrong, and we're
Mhm.
just kind of convinced of it.
And
What
yeah,
was
you know what you need to do, Leighton? You
what?
need to clear up your chakras and get a Reiki session.
Yeah, yeah, right. Chemo. Chemo doesn't kill cancer cells; it kills us all cells, and they're just hoping it doesn't cause too much collateral damage. Yeah. Um. No,
It's
I
just
have.
you. It's like, hey, I'll solve the. To me, it's actually a metaphor of like the U.S. government. Hey, there's a group of people. There's a group of gang members right here. We'll bomb the whole city. I'm like, yeah, but you'll kill everybody. Yeah, do it. America, freedom. We're like, hey, you bombed the whole town. Like, well, the word gang. It's just like, yeah, let's kill all cells, and yeah, I guess you'll kill some cancer cells if you kill everything. So that's my issue.
All right,
My
let's look at this story here. This is an interesting one. Uh, a metal detectorist is suing the FBI, claiming that he alerted them to 7 tons of Civil War era gold, and they took it away in a secret overnight dig. So I don't know the validity of this, but I thought this story was insane, and I wanted to read it. So the court ordered release of a trove of government photos, videos, maps, and other documents involving the FBI's secretive search for Civil War era gold as a treasure hunter more convinced than ever of a cover up and just as determined to prove it. Dennis Parada waged a legal battle to force the FBI to turn over records of its excavation in Dents Run, Pennsylvania, where local lore says an 1863 shipment of Union gold disappeared on its way to the U.S., mint in Philadelphia. The FBI, which went to Dents Run after sophisticated testing suggested tons of gold might be buried there, has long insisted the dig came up empty. Parada and his advisors, who have spent countless hours poring over the newly released government records, believe otherwise. They accuse the FBI of distorting key evidence and improperly withholding records in an apparent effort to conceal the recovery of historic, extremely valuable gold cache. The FBI defends its handling of the materials. Parada's dispute the FBI is playing out in federal court, where a judge overseeing the case must decide whether the FBI will have to release its operational plan for the gold dig and other records it wants to keep secret. The judge also the judge also could order the FBI to keep looking for additional materials to turn over for the treasure hunter. We feel we were double crossed and lied to, Parada said in an interview at his cramped wood paneled office, where huge drill bits and high end metal detectors compete for space with rusty miner's picks, Civil War era cannon parts, and odd and ends he's dug up over the years. The truth will come out, said Parada, co founder of the treasure hunting outfit Finders Keepers. Solving the mystery is not our only goal. We had hoped to earn a finder's fee from the potential recovery of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold. An FBI spokesperson declined to answer questions about the agency's gold dig records. Oh, hey, look. Rise to Liberty.
is Rose to Liberty.
I don't think your mic's coming through now. There's little evidence in the historical record to suggest that any Army detachment lost gold shipment in the Pennsylvania wilderness, possibly the result of an ambush by Confederate sympathizers. But the legend has inspired generations of treasure hunters, Parada among them. He and his son spent years looking for fabled gold at Dents Run, eventually guiding the FBI to a remote woodland site 135 miles northwest of Pittsburgh, where they say their instruments identified a large quantity of metal. The FBI brought in a geophysical consulting firm whose sensitive equipment detected a 7 to 9 ton mass suggestion of gold. So
All right.
7 to 9 ton. I think you're coming through now, yeah.
Hey.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sweet.
So this guy claims he led the FBI to a place where they found detected 7 to 9 tons of mass that suggested of gold. So that would be 7 tons of gold is like trillions. That's like $2 trillion or something like that.
Yeah.
1.9, 1.8. I might be off. Uh, we've identified through our investigation site that we believe has U.S. property, which includes a significant sum of base metal, which is valuable, particular gold, maybe silver, the agent said on the video, his face blurred by the FBI to protect his privacy. So the FBI is admitting that the gold's there, or that they collected gold from there, calling it a 155-year-old cold case. He said the FBI had corroborated Parada's information about the location of the reputed gold through scientific testing. He stressed the test result did not prove the presence of gold. Only a dig would help law enforcement get to the bottom of the story once and for all, the agent said. Prada obtained the video and other FBI records through Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, hoping they would help answer lingering questions about what took place at Dent's Run 5 years ago. Prada was mostly kept away from the dig site while the FBI did its work. He suspects the agency conducted a clandestine overnight dig between the first and second days of the court authorized excavation, found the gold, and speared it away. Residents had previously told of hearing a backhoe and jackhammer overnight when the dig was supposed to have been paused and seeing a convoy of FBI vehicles, including large armored trucks. So at this point, we can go ahead and quit it. We get the idea of the story. But so this guy led the FBI to what he suspected was a bunch of gold. The FBI confirmed that there was a bunch of metal there that was valuable, and then claimed that they didn't actually find any metal there and that it was empty. And he's saying, nah, you stole 7 tons of gold or silver. The part of this story that seems confusing to me, and this is just my general take, is this guy's a longtime treasure hunter. Why the fuck would you take the government to the gold in the first place if you thought it was there? Like, if it's on government land, that means it's public property, which means he could have gone and collected it and still gotten a finder's fee. So it's kind of confusing to me. It seems like maybe this guy's making stories up, but why would you FOIA request and sue? And that stuff costs money. Benzo Barbie, sorry I'm late. Welcome to the shit show.
I don't know. This is a little bit of an odd story because yeah, there's one part where it's like, okay, why is he doing this specifically? The FBI is saying it's there, but I don't know. I think the FBI wants to cash in on it like they stole Ross Ulbricht stuff, where I got to actually see Lynn Ulbricht, finally in convention, which was cool. That's what I think is going on. They're like, oh, okay, we can steal this.
Yeah, that does make sense. All right, and then I guess the other thing, there was the whole Kanye stuff. I saw Kanye trended on
What's he
Twitter
doing
again.
now?
Yay, trended on Twitter again. It was to do with his kid posting on TikTok and him posting a video talking about his kid in relation to being on TikTok. And I saw some interesting takes on it, but I read Tree of Logic, who had a take on it that I thought was actually correct, or at least mostly correct. So I think we'll look at that tweet and listen to that. And then wasn't there a story we were waiting for him to show up for? What was it? I'm forgetting now.
Alan Dershowitz. And
Oh, we were gonna watch that Alan Dershowitz clip. Right.
Oh,
your
Alex
metaphor
Stein.
was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Well,
That was
nut.
Don Terrius.
Alex Stein is incredibly good at talking to people and getting them to say things and just kind of converse. But I'm assuming the way he got Dershowitz on this show, other than Jewish trickery, has to be the fact that he's at Blaze. and so he kind of used that as a talking stick to get you in the door.
You think he's
So
like Sacha Baron Cohen in a way that he'll like get you to do an interview and people like the only way to fight terrorists is with your butt, and then people are like, "Yeah, I got America."
Sacha Baron Cohen's kind of faggy now. I think he's a little bit better than that.
I always thought he was.
So I like the old like I watched
Ollie G in the house.
yeah, I watched Ollie G, I watched Borat, I watched Bruno. Bruno was the first movie he did where I was like, this is just bad. Like I didn't like it.
It was terrible.
The humor in it was not great, and I got like 45 minutes in and turned it off. And that was when I think he kind of tipped off the deep end. Uh, yeah, Dershowitz is one of the 3 confirmed on the Epstein list, so there's that. Yes, he is, and that's what we're referring to. Stein got him on the show and then grilled him on some of the stuff. Chum, another documentary you might be interested in, is Run from the Cure by Rick Simpson. Rick Simpson, would that be Rick Simpson oil? Rick Simpson is in the guy who invented Rick Simpson oil. I did a video on him on TikTok and YouTube on a secret YouTube channel that I run. That doesn't, but one of the many. But on another YouTube channel that I run, I did a video on Rick Simpson. He created Rick Simpson oil, cured his cancer with it. It's a high potency metabolic THC oil. It's great stuff.
And I had some, and holy shit, that stuff will keep me stoned for like 2 days if I take a dose.
Yeah, it's
It
good.
is no joke.
It's good shit. There's places down here you can get it at the shop I regular down here. And that's yeah. I always saw it at the shops and they'll call it RSO oil or RSO.
Yeah.
But most people don't know that's Rick Simpson oil RSO. That's what it actually abbreviates to. Funny that you bring him up in the chat, but yeah, I didn't know he had a documentary. That must be about his life and the cancer thing and stuff, which is probably interesting. So I probably will give that a watch. So I guess I could talk briefly. He was chased out of Canada, and now lives in exile in South America, but my free Canadian healthcare. Yeah. Yeah, that's how it normally goes. Okay, I do want to talk briefly about. So I did the Joe Vogler videos out. The next one I'm working on, I have kind of been tossing in the air back and forth because I have 2 stories that I have that, and neither one of them have been really done on YouTube yet. The first is Kristen Snyder, who is a woman. The reason this story is one that I kind of came up on my radar is because it's connected to the town I live in. So Kristen Snyder was in Washington. She flew from Washington to Anchorage, Alaska, and then somehow she was last seen in Anchorage, and then her vehicle was found at Miller's Landing, which is about 15 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. It's just down that way. And her vehicle was found there. There was a suicide note in it. And she disappeared. Her body was not found anywhere near the vehicle, nothing. The reason this is a weird story and not just a normal suicide where it's just open and shut is because the thing that she had attended in Anchorage was a meeting with a group called ESG, which was started by the guy who ran Nexium, which was a cult. And Nexium, now everybody knows what that is. It's kind of famous. It's talked about. But this happened in 2003. And when it happened in 2003, he was doing this group called ESG. And when he was doing the thing for this thing called ESG, it was like something coaching, it was branded as like a professional coaching thing. and he was meeting at the time in, I believe, New York and Alaska were the two places that his main operation was going on. And I have all the websites and stuff and things like that archived for this, for obviously for the documentary portion of it. But basically, um, she left there in Anchorage, and she was actually at an ESG meeting. And in her suicide note, she mentions that that's where she was at, and the suicide note's very cryptic. Basically, it appears to me like either she killed herself because of whatever she was being done to her at those meetings, because they were into a lot of psychological stuff, or she didn't actually kill herself, which gets into another part of the problem, which is because this happened somewhere I live. I happen to know that the area her vehicle was left is kind of the perfect area if you wanted to disappear, because you can have a boat leave the launch, the docks here in Seward, and if you caught it, either by swimming out or by using a kayak, which happened to have been missing the night that she left, you could very easily catch a ride on that boat, and there would be no record of you being on that boat when you left the dock or on the dock cameras. So it would be a very good way to just vanish. Well, the ESG group and the guys that were connected to that whole thing were fucking batty as shit, and they were freaking on people. So if she got a bad vibe from it, or maybe thought she was in danger, you needed to disappear, that's one way you could do it. If she's still alive now, she'd only be 55. So, because it's not like it happened that long ago. So,
have you ever heard of The Body?
Yeah, so that's everybody's been talking about this recently, because some guy made this. I watched the documentary. The documentary is complete crap, if I'm being honest. It doesn't really do very much for me.
I tried actually getting him on my show for an interview. And, I mean, obviously the name of my show is Rise to Liberty, but I don't just cover politics. Like, I'll just cover whatever I want. It's my show. And, like, his answer was so weird. He's such a weird guy.
I don't know. I got a weird vibe from his whole thing, and I watched the documentary.
He's a weird fucking guy.
I don't know where in the state he lives. I really don't. But I know
he doesn't live in Alaska.
Oh, he doesn't even live in the. Well, then I don't give a fuck what he says. Then.
He's a journalist. Lives in, like, I think Georgia or something like that.
Okay, so here's the thing. Like, I know a lot of people who live in Fairbanks and in the area that he's claiming this cult existed. The reality is, there are a lot of, quote, cults in this state. It's sort of a haven for people who want to get away from people. There's only a population of 730,000, and again, it's over twice the size of Texas.
I mean,
so,
if you're going to be a cult, Alaska seems
it's
like
kind of the best place, right? The body's the only thing that has ever been put on the body as being negative is this washing process that they do, which is this idea that they get into these tents and they strip down naked, and the other members of the cult wash them. The reality is, that ain't that big of a deal to me. Like, I mean, I don't know. If you have a kid,
they're doing it to little kids,
if you're putting, that's where it becomes a problem. And the issue that I find is, you've got a journalist who's not in the state, who's saying this stuff's going on because these few people say it is. But you also have all these members of this group who, so out of the hundreds of people who tangentially came in contact with them, only 2 or 3 people had anything negative to say. Like, that's not typically how cults go.
That second in hand, I can't remember what his name is, but he does seem off. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to hang out with him.
For the record, I wouldn't want to chill with these guys. I wouldn't want to drink beer with them. I wouldn't want to go have a good time. These are creepy fucking people. But the thing is the culture up here is just different.
Creepy isn't illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Creepy isn't illegal, and unless they're hurting somebody,
Yeah,
or there's a bunch of
Ooh.
people running out of there saying they touched me or they hurt me, which
That
I'm
needs to be a
sorry,
t-shirt.
but out of hundreds of people, having a couple people coming out and saying they, washed my body when I was younger is not something that I think is going to make people turn on a group of
yeah.
people.
Well, here
Um,
actually, funny enough, like recently, I think before the 50th show, we had the anniversary of Waco, and that was
Right.
kind of the arguments they were making about.
That's the exact and this
Well,
is exactly what I'm talking about. It's the exact
Yeah.
same argument.
It's like, oh well, he's kind of weird, he's kind of religious, he's stockpiling. Okay, fine, all right, that's probably all true.
He keeps
Maybe-
dodging us.
Yeah, he keeps dodging us. And I'm not even gonna say Koresh didn't mess with anyone who was like underage, because I don't know. I've heard he did.
I mean, I'll be the first to say I'm sure he very well might have, and I would say it doesn't matter. And I know
I'm gonna go
people
out
will
on a
get
limb
like,
and say he didn't.
well, so I think that I have, and I haven't read up on this, but my understanding is some of those accounts only happened after the events of Waco, and then that became entered into the kind of lexicon. My understanding is there were some things that happened before Waco took place. There were 2, I think, complaints to OCS or something along those lines. I would be more inclined to believe the 2 reports from before Waco than I would be inclined to believe what the media reported after Waco took place. So I think those have to be sort of dissected, and then you're going to have to look at those cases from before Waco and really get into the details and minutia of it and figure out whether or not those were even viable.
Yeah, that's
Here's
my
the thing.
question.
Again, being in this state, I've got to watch a lot of cults develop, and it's just sort of a thing people talk about here. There's been a lot of small kind of community-based cults that have existed. They kind of come around, they die out, they come around, die out. It's just a thing. And
I could be a cult leader.
the truth is a lot of these cults, especially ones with kind of Messianic or head god figure kind of males as the head of it, sort of always turns into a sex thing. And
every time.
It's just kind of what happens. And even here. And so there is a part of me that goes, if he's at that point and he's had that much time to sort of do what he's been doing and kind of develop his ideas and develop the system they were living in, which he had at that point, it's very possible he was double dicking a lot of people in that fucking compound. And if that's going on, some of them might have been some 14, 15, 16-year-olds that got thrown in the mix. And I could see that being something where it's like, okay, well, we got you. But at the same time, again, I'd have to like look into those any report that came in before Waco. Not after, because I think after you
from
can't.
From what I've read, from the people I've talked to, I just get the feeling he didn't. Not saying that there wasn't anything creepy on the compound, because I mean he wasn't the only male out there.
Right. Right. There were other.
It just doesn't seem like David.
It seems convenient.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very convenient. Yeah. And
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
No,
I know,
and that's to stick up for a pedophile.
I'm well read on the events of Waco. I'm well read on what the religious beliefs of the Branch Davidians were. I'm not as well read on the stuff that happened before or the investigations into like, hey, this guy did this, this guy did that. So it's something I'm a little less read on. Here, Spud said, the guy in the compound with all the weapons was a legitimate firearms dealer. True. That had almost his entire stock with him at a gun show a few days previous to the raid. They had every chance to arrest or take him in. They also could have just waited for him to leave the compound at any point.
They knew his schedule.
Which
they knew his schedule down to the minute he left.
which is a point that I make in the Joe Vogler documentary, to go back to that for a second, is with the Manfred West character being this guy who supposedly killed Vogler alone. And when you start to dig into that, you go, okay, well, he wasn't he wasn't like I just lost my train of thought. What was I comparing it to? Before
Vogler.
before that, what were we talking about? Shit, I lost my train of thought in the middle of my fucking sentence. Damn it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. You weren't far enough along for me to know.
So when Manfred West was they tried to apprehend Manfred West. And the way they did it was they found out that he wasn't in the halfway house and he had ran. They found out that he was in his stepbrother's cabin. And so they parked an RV outside of it. And then eventually barricaded him in there, and he barricaded himself in, and they went into hostage negotiations or whatever, negotiating to try to get him to come out. And then he ended up burning the cabin down. At least, that's the cabin caught on fire anyway. And the cabin burned down on top of him. The police claimed that the fire was too bad and they were worried about ammunition that was in the cabin to put the fire out. So they just let the fire burn out. And it's like, so you kind of expected him to be dead. Now he survived that fire by sheer chance because he fell into the crawl space and the water had collected in the bottom of the crawl space. And so when they got through the rubble of the fire, he's still alive. And if you look at that, you go, okay, well, this is very comparable to the fact that, like, they could have waited at any point in time for Manfred West to just leave the cabin before they initiated the barricading process or the negotiations or anything. They didn't have to hide in an RV to try to catch this guy, just like they didn't with Koresh. They could have literally just waited for him to leave. Eventually, he's going to need food, or he's going to need water, or he's going to want to see the fucking sunlight. So instead, they did it in a way in which they got to kill a bunch of innocent people, and they did it because they wanted media opportunities. They wanted to record it and have a flashy thing to pass around.
Well, yeah, the ATF actually had like a bunch of lawsuits against them at the time for like sexual assault and like a bunch of claims of like racism and stuff from within the organization, and so they wanted anything to take the light off of them.
Yep.
So let's just go kill somebody that we can frame as a crazy religious cult leader.
Yeah, but obviously the government's not against that because they'll put those in the Middle East and cooperate with those guys as long as they're part of our agenda. That's fine. I mean, of course, Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset. He even said it. I mean,
yeah.
So was Harvey Lee Oswald. So.
Yeah. So that's the first thing that I'm trying to decide upon is whether I want to do the next documentary on the Tony Knowles thing, or rather, I'm sorry, whether I want to do it on the Kristen Snyder case because she disappeared out here, and then I can go film and actually get footage from where her vehicle was found. There's still some of the Millers who owned the resorts and stuff out there in 2003 who are still alive, so I can go interview some of them possibly. Their claim is that they actually saw her vehicle out there in that area while she claimed to be at the meeting in Anchorage, which
and
would
how long ago was this?
This is 2003 when her vehicle was found. She went missing like a week before that or something like that.
It's not that long ago.
No, it's not an insane length of time, so it's fairly easy to track down. The other one is I've got this stuff I'm looking into with so the story goes like this. I was looking into some stuff to do with these military bases and just the connections of them, maps and stuff. And I was looking for old decommissioned ones that I could go look at and stuff. And there were these two on one map that I had from Sitka, Alaska, which is ways off from me here. But over in Sitka, Alaska, there were these two military like storage things from World War II. And so I started looking up the locations of them to try to find more documentation on what they exactly were. Found out they were just World War II storage, like underground storage facilities, and they have like a little nipple-shaped thing up top. Well, while I was looking for what they were, I found these messages that were sent from the governor of Alaska, Tony Knowles, in 1999, and he was reaching out to the federal government to kind of lambasting them and talking shit to them, saying that there were 138 bodies that had been left in the World War II bunkers and had been cemented over, and that most of them were the bodies of Native children that had been serviced at for tuberculosis at the Sitka hospital that was in operation from 1940 to 1960. That none of the bodies had names, that none of them were given any records, so that was exceedingly hard to track down who any of them were, and that they were asking the feds for money to go get the bodies, basically, return them to the family. The problem is that I never found any confirmation that they actually went and got the bodies. And so I started looking into that, and I still didn't find any confirmation that they went and got the bodies.
Is there any confirmation that there even were bodies?
So yes, I found plenty of people in the past talking about them being present there. And so him sending out saying they were there makes sense. And it's been reported on before. So then I found that the airport in Sitka was expanded in 2011. And the expansion map had them moving the airport directly over where those bunkers were, which they did. And so now my question becomes, is the Sitka airport currently built on top of 138 dead Native kids? And is that something that needs to maybe be looked at? Maybe some light investigating into. So that's sort of the two stories I'm looking at covering. I think I'm going to do the Kristen Snyder one first. I'm currently in contact with the Sitka tribe in Alaska over there. They're the native tribe in that area, and luckily for me, the guy who was looking into the bodies, trying to identify them back in 99, is still alive. And he's actually on the board of the Sitka tribe. So I'm going to get in contact with him.
I'm really interested to see what you dig up on this. This is definitely.
And then hopefully get some more info through him.
So the reason I asked if there was even bodies in the first place, obviously, like a lot of people heard about the mass graves in Canada of the natives. Well, there's a few of those mass graves up there where there's no graves. There's no bodies. So, and let's see, it was 2000 or 2021 when like all the people were like burning down churches and stuff. Yeah, burned churches over no bodies.
Yep.
And mind you, I'm a half native that comes from a like my dad was actually adopted out of one of these like Native American boarding schools where white people can go and pick out a native baby.
Yeah.
So it's a little sensitive topic, but nonetheless, like there were no bodies in some of these places, and it was kind of just used to emotionally manipulate people, because who thinks to even question like, well, are there actually bodies there?
Right. So I will say this, a lot of people equate, and I see this happen a lot, they equate the Yukon Territory, which is where you have a lot of native populations that were part of the Canadian kind of side of things, which do mix in with the Alaska Natives, but then you have the Native Americans, which are like your, Arizona, Colorado, these areas, Pennsylvania, these
Yeah.
areas. But the Alaska Natives are different. Like the genetic makeup, everything, just that they came from a different place. They got there. Um, Realistically, we don't really know how long they've been here, which, because there's an assumption that, well, these people came over the land bridge, but there's not really a confirmation of that because you don't know if any of them were seafaring or if anybody came over through that way, or just cutting through on the other side, which is another possibility. But so there's not a ton of confirmation there. But the treatment of Native Americans in like the lower 48 is separate, and a lot of people sort of just kind of glom it in, but
Yeah.
the way that the Alaska Natives were fucked is very different than the rest of the natives, because in their position they just had a state and were like up here on their own building up communities, and then the Russians came over and enslaved a bunch of them, and then eventually the US bought the fucking state, and the natives are like, but this is ours. Like, you can't just buy it. And then they just slowly trickled in settlers. Versus this system where, like, the government action system versus just the slow death, like, of, okay, well, all these gold panners and gold miners are going to pour into the state, and you're going to get TB and you have natural ways of curing TB, which we have on record that the natives were doing this in Alaska, that they had cured it en masse. The problem is that you go from the normal records of TB that you had and being able to deal with that to having the population triple and then quadruple and all those people come in, and now your rate of tuberculosis, your rate of all these other diseases that go along with it have gone through the roof. And then they set up all these hospitals. So then they go, don't do your natural healing methods. Don't listen to what you've been doing. We're going to take you to these hospitals. And then when your kid dies in the hospital, which they knew was going to happen to begin with, they go and take the body and just throw it in a military old bunker that they're not using anymore and fill it in with concrete. And it's like, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I could see being pissed. I see you dropped in the
What's
private
fucked
chat.
up about that? That just sounds like every story I've heard about how natives were treated.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's a lot of like, and with the Alaska Natives too, it's like their way of living was so different, and they had it being dealt with by the same Indian affairs groups that are dealing with Plains Indians and Indians that come from, the lower 48 that have a
and the
completely
desert
different
Indians and
yeah, they have a completely different way of living. The Alaska Natives were far more territory based, far more territorial, and then on top of it, they were, I don't want to say communist, but they were almost sort of commie in nature in the way that they ran their markets. They, if one group
it was most tribes actually.
Right, if one group couldn't produce a product because of where they were in the state, or if the fishing was different in that area, they would go to the other group and they would trade back and forth. And that's sort of how all these tribes created their kind of, way of life over here.
Well, that's kind of how some of the natives in my area actually had to live, because they were, high mountain desert.
Right.
And so resources were so scarce, especially because of water. It literally was, due to that, a communist-like society, just on pure survival.
Right. Yeah, and the reality is that the Alaska Natives were all very military in nature. Like, it was all, not only were they fighting inward with themselves, but you also have this fact that the Russians came over and enslaved a bunch of them. So there's this sort of idea of like, we're not letting that happen again.
I don't know what's worst. What's worse is Eastern white people or Western white people. They're both coming at you.
Yeah, and then again you have like, okay, so the Russians are enslaving you and killing you, and then the West buys the state, and then they come over and they do the exact same treatment of you. You're like, well, no, you're still native, so you're still a second-class citizen and have no rights. Like, and then one of the worst things
pick
is
up
modern.
your shit and go over here.
Right, one of the worst is modern, which is, and this is completely forgotten in history for most people, but during World War II, there were attacks on the harbor of Alaska. And everybody talks about that, and a lot of people are taught that in school, but what they don't talk about is where those attacks happened in relation to who lived there. The attack did not happen on American, soil in a sense. It happened in native communities first. If you look into the prisoners that were taken by the Japanese during that attack, they actually captured almost an entire tribe of natives that were living here in the state of Alaska, including a white woman who they took back to Japan with them. I believe it was Japan that they were taken to or whatever, but it was taken to like a prisoner of war setup for captured people. And a lot of them are like disappeared historically. Like we don't know where they ended up. And it's like a really kind of fucked up thing because you're like, you have to kind of assume most of these people ended up dead. And when that happened, the United States, instead of protecting the shores of what was technically America, and instead of doing something right then and bombing the shit out of the people who had attacked them in the first place, they decided to take all the natives that were living in the surrounding areas and just move them into camps. Just put them into war camps, which put them in a situation where they got higher rates of TB, where they got higher rates of all these diseases, and all of that whole system of, I dare to use the word colonization that happened throughout the early, times of the early 1900s started all over again in the 1940s because they moved all
that
these,
or just slaughter them.
Right, and then in reality, like, there were tons of established cities in the state of Alaska where these people could have easily lived in, and if they wanted to move them, or they could have said, "This is your land, and you've lived here forever, and so we're going to arm you, and you're going to have a right to defend your land," which is probably what I would have geared more on the side of.
I would have much rather built them into my defenses, but
yeah, it doesn't make sense.
fucking racist white people.
Yeah, and instead they gathered them up and literally put them in camps, and it's like, oh, so we're just breaking out the train cars in 1940s, and this is during World War II. So you're like, okay, so this is just you're just doing the same thing that Germans were doing. It's no different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you were willing to bat an eyelash at what what the Japanese were doing in their test camps and what the horrible shit that their groups did. I think it's Troop 7-1 something, but there's
Unit 731.
731, yeah, Unit 731 that did horrible
shit.
That the U.S.
human
signed up on because they let these scientists into the U.S. and in many cases gave them new identities, gave them new.
Well, it's because they wanted the test results of exactly what they had done. That
different than Operation Paperclip. It's no different.
Exactly. That and I mean, when we entered the war, we basically told we told Britain, yeah, we'll back you up, but we want all of your patents.
Yeah, we want to take it all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's ours now, and then we'll come help.
Yeah. No,
Jesus Christ, Truman.
Yeah, it's so the I'm definitely somebody who falls on the more sympathetic side of the Native American / Alaska Native / that whole thing, because I think, and I'll say this. I think there's positions I hold in different areas. Like, for instance, I know a bit of the history of the Native Americans in Pennsylvania, and that area, that was a very militant situation that those people, the white people, were in. There were a lot of kids and daughters and wives that were getting killed, and like I can see how military action and stuff like that happens if that's what's being done. And I understand the argument of like, well, they're on their land and you kind of moved into their area, but it's like, yeah, that argument only works for so long. Like
But here's the thing about the natives, though, is they are the only people who put up a fight against the white man for like 400 years.
I'm full. Yeah, that's 100%. I don't take any of that.
It was straight up like back and forth for the longest time. So I'm actually torn like on one half because I'm actually a quarter native. I obviously am sympathetic to certain things, but we were also lied to, obviously, about this whole idea of like the peaceful savage or whatever, or the peaceful natives. It's like, no, nah. Like some tribes were very peaceful, but other tribes were not. So
right.
It
Yeah,
just
and
like
I
everything
think
else, there's like so much to it that we were never told, so much context that I don't know.
right. I think
I'm just
there's,
torn.
and I think that's where I see a lot of the differences is because I think with what we see with, over here was there was such a big distance of land in between people who were moving into the state and these native populations that never really became much of a problem. Like you didn't,
Yeah.
there were native people who killed white people over here. But
Yeah, brutally.
not in mass. You didn't have like, a war band of, Tlingit or another one of these native groups, tribes in the state of Alaska.
Yeah,
You
it
didn't
wasn't
have
like,
these bands of
North
them
and
going
South
out.
Dakota. With,
Exactly. You didn't have this bushwhacking of camps and like, hey, 80 people in a white camp were killed yesterday because they were ransacked by a group of natives. This stuff, which you can go read the history in Pennsylvania and stuff, and you're like, oh, okay, like I get what you mean by this was militant. Like, no, it's like just a news reporting being put out in the bulletin, and it's like 90 people scalped, and it's like, oh Jesus Christ! You're like, it's like one night,
women and children, and you're like,
yeah,
oh Lord.
Because the belief structure was that they didn't really hold value, and so you got to just get rid of them now, otherwise that's more white people that are going to be here. So you just have to kind of kill everyone, and it's like, so you're only going
to is that like. So this whole idea of like Christopher Columbus coming with smallpox blankets. It's like, okay, that might be factually what happened. However, he's not this like dastardly, evil genius twirling his mustache like, oh, smallpox. Germ theory didn't exist at that time, so the idea that he purposely infected blankets to purposely spread disease is just ludicrous. Obviously, it makes sense now, but back then they didn't even wash their hands before they performed surgery.
One of the best videos on that topic I've seen is there's a YouTube video. Anybody in the chat hasn't seen, I suggest it, from a YouTube channel called Knowing Better. And I'm not a fan of all of his videos, but he has a video on Christopher Columbus, and it's going over the Adam ruins everything thing that he did, and he spends just 45 minutes breaking down the real history of Christopher Columbus through what actually we have of the guy, which isn't all that much, because everybody likes to quote what he said when they don't actually know what he said, because the only words that you have of his that are written down was a book that was written by somebody else. And so he points all these things out and goes over sort of the history of who he was, where he was from, what he did. And the the theories behind the smallpox blankets, that whole thing. Realistically, the native populations which he encountered were already declining at the time, and they had been at that point for 100 years or so. And that was not necessarily due to completely disease, but due to a bunch of other things. But the reality is, like, disease is always going to happen when you introduce new populations that are not related to those diseases. You're never going to end that. It's always going to happen. You can try to minimize or get rid of it as much as possible. But the reality is that ain't going to work, because at some point these people are going to come into contact with somebody. And
that's really hard to control when you don't even understand.
There's
or
a
even have
word for this.
Concept of germs.
There's a concept of that in law currently, as we speak, which is, a matter of fact, I was just watching a video on this about a shooting, and it applies to shooting, but I'll explain it, connect the two. So there's a guy who, it was like 2 days before Halloween. These two guys were going to a Halloween party. They had an address for the party. They went to the wrong address, in a pretty seedy neighborhood. The door was locked. They jiggle the handle instead of knocking on the door because they thought it was the party house and they were just trying to get in. The wife sees these two guys in masks and bandages because they were in costume outside the door, screams for her husband. Husband comes out, swings open the door. One of the people come inside the house thinking, hey, they opened the door for us. He shoots the guy, kills him. They charged the guy with murder, and he was found not guilty. But the way that they found him not guilty was specifically that it was a phrasing, and the phrasing has left my brain at this point. But basically what it means is you killed the person, and the person shouldn't have died. But the way that they were killed is an honest mistake that anybody could make, assessing the situation that happened in that individual instance. So in this case, there was no way for
unfortunate circumstance.
Right, it's unfortunate circumstances. In this case, like, it's a couple days before Halloween, so it makes sense that they're wearing costumes, but at the same time, it doesn't. And it makes sense because they were going to a party, but the person on the other end of the door has no way of knowing that. And then when the one guy walked towards him and he had something in his hand, sure, it was something different, but he doesn't know that. It's dark. And so, there's all these assumptions
all the way around.
Exactly. And so I look at what happened.
That would suck.
Yeah, it really would suck. And you're going to think about that for the rest of your life. Like, did I need to do that? And then at the same time, that guy's family is going to think, it's like, that's a bad situation to be in. But realistically, that happens all the time. And it doesn't just happen with stuff like murder. It happens in small scales with tiny little things. And so my thing is that I look at what happened with the natives and the diseases and things like that, and I go, well, again, this was going to happen no matter what. Anybody would reasonably think that if they saw some people on the side of a beach bar, let's go say hi to them. These people have never met people like us. We have things to trade. We have things to give them. They have things to give us. We need supplies. Whatever the case may be, it's completely reasonable that anybody would have done exactly that. And so you can't destroy somebody's legacy or, charge them with a crime or purge them as being this murderer because of that, because they're not.
Hold
they're
them
just not.
to today's standards.
Yeah.
That's what irritates the shit out of me, is trying to hold people of yesterday to today's standards. First of all, that doesn't mean today's standards are super wonderful. There's all kinds of terrible things. So judging them on today's standards doesn't mean that it's any better. Maybe actually that standard's better. So that's just ridiculous.
And it's not like, realistically, like, the standards we have today on so many things, and especially, like, it's not like natives are getting treated great now. Like,
not really.
We've stuck them on reservations. We took a bunch of their gun rights away. Like, there's this whole thing called Wounded Knee. Like people should read about it a little bit, but it's not like this is anything new. This shit's been going on recently. Like, The shit that I'm talking about with them putting the Alaska Natives in internment camps and slave camps, basically, that was in the 40s. So it's like that. Even
we
that
had
wasn't that long
Japanese
ago.
here in Utah, in the
Yeah, so it's
concentration
like
camps. So.
exactly. So it's like this isn't anything new. Like it's like, and again, like if you're outside of what the government considers a norm, which I would say especially native populations fall into that bracket, then you're even easier for them to fuck over. Like if you think
it's independence.
If you think low income black and white neighborhoods are vulnerable, you haven't met native communities, because they're going to get decimated far before any of those groups do, because they're easier targets because less people give a shit. And so they can just kind of have free reign. Like, how many Tuskegee experiments are going on as we speak in little native communities all across the US? Like, I guarantee you that's going on, because they don't
at
have.
This point, I'm pretty sure it's like we're probably on a pretty even keel, where I think we're pretty much all getting treated like that. I mean, Ohio,
And we filed a report. Yeah, I thought I killed a guy once, self-defense-ish, had a knife on my ex-boyfriend's throat and dragged him out of our car. I jumped on him and cut his throat. He limped away, and we filed a report. Yeah.
fucking brutal.
He was arrested a couple weeks later with a big old red healing wound. I did not lose sleep. Yeah, here's the thing. Like, in Big Lake, where I'm from, we were in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. If somebody breaks into your house, you're going to kill them. And no one's going to see that guy's body for hours, because you're going to have to wait for cops to come out. Like, that's the kind of like living situation you're in. It's also vice versa. If somebody's robbing your house and they get on the jump on you, you have no one to fucking help you. So you better stay fucking strapped and protected. I mean, I was a kid, and in Big Lake, I knew, here's where all the guns are. There's a 38 in this glove box. There's a 30-30 over here. Because we had junk cars on the yard and stuff like that, because we had an acre of land out there and stuff. There was one time, and I don't want to get into details because it's not all that long ago, but there was a guy who was beefing with a bunch of people in our neighborhood, specifically with somebody who was related to me, and they waited for that person's vehicle to not be at my house so they could come to the cabin. What they did not realize is that me and my older brother were at the cabin. And me and my older brother both took 30-30 rifles out, because we had a long driveway. And everybody knows this about me. I like old guns. I don't like a lot of new guns. So we have always had, since I was very young, like Model 94 30-30s. That was always what the household guns were. Never ARs, stuff like that. Always revolvers, old guns. So we both had lever action 30-30s, and we put a couple rounds into the side of the guy's car and his truck and stuff. And he peeled out of there pretty quick. He didn't want to deal with it, but he was armed. I mean, he had a gun, and he got out of the vehicle, and he wanted trouble. And it was like, all right, you want trouble? I bet I can hit you from there, and I bet your handgun ain't gonna do shit from there. So it was one of those situations where I could have stood there and taken shots, and he was further enough away. I was like, you ain't hitting me, motherfucker. And this 30-30 with a trapdoor sight on it is you are capital F fucked. Like, dude, I can, with a 30-30, like a standard Model 94, I can fucking shoot, dude. Like, it's scary. Because those sights, everybody hates those sights, because it has these like rounded window sights, and so it closes everything you're shooting off down to this little tiny fucking just. But I used to take, when I was young, I used to take Coke cans, and when we were done with the cans of Coke, we'd take them out and see how far you could shoot them and stuff. My dad's like Jesus, I don't understand how he's as good at shooting as he is, because he's old and his eyesight's bad, just like me. So I don't get it. But I'm with a 30-30 and with a 44 Magnum revolver. I'm a very good shot, and that's only because it's what I've shot over and over and over
Muscle
again.
memory.
Yeah, like pretty much any 44 Magnum that has a 4 6-inch barrel, I can grab and just and people get weirded out because 44 is such a huge, a big caliber, and everybody sees these YouTube reviewers and YouTube videos of these guys who are so used to shooting 9mm and 10mm and 40 cal and all these smaller calibers that they see YouTube reviews of people shooting 44 Magnums and how hard they're shadowed up with both their arms and stuff. And like, I can grab my Model 94, like, and shoot all 6 rounds with one arm outreached.
Yep.
And I'm going to hit the target in the center every time. Like, that's just
I mean,
because
shit, I used to carry 1911 full size, 45 ACP.
I had
and
a
that
little
thing
GI
is-
one, the
that
little
thing
like
is,
baby model.
like little over 5 pounds fully loaded. It's not that good of a concealed carry, but shoulder holster, couple extra clips. But man, I mean, it's just all about what you use the most, and you get that muscle memory down.
Well, I like the only other like handgun I ever was a really big fan of is a big fan of the Makarov. I have a Bakal model Makarov, so it's the cheap Hungarian one, but it's got the 9mm Makarov ammunition. I want to find the Hungarian Feg model, which has like a stainless instead of black. But that one's a 380 model, which I think I want more because it's hard to get 9mm Makarov now because they cut off the Russian ammunition. So it's a little bit tricky to get. There's still some manufacturers of it in the US, but not many. And so I think I'm going to have to go the route of finding one in 380 because that's a little more common. So, but I love Makarovs that like the barrel's part of the gun. It's all part of the frame. So it's not a floating barrel. It's all just straight blowback, like old school.
And
And
I'll tell you this one company that I'm always super surprised at that kind of gets shit on is Taurus.
so I have a
Absolutely love
Taurus. I have a Taurus Model 44 Magnum, and it's not as nice as the Ruger Red Hawk. But it's not a bad gun. It has a really good port system for the barrel. I like that. The problem that I've always heard with Taurus is there was a period in the mid 70s to early 80s where a lot of the revolvers they were putting out would go out of timing, and it gave them a very bad rap in the firearm community. But as far as now, I've owned probably 20 plus Taurus firearms in the last 2-3 years, just within trading and selling and doing my own hustling. And every one of them's been fine. I've never really had an issue. I have had a Model 29. I think it was a Model 29. It kind of looks like a Colt Python. It's a 357. And it unfortunately did go out of timing, but again, that's a gun that was made right in the sweet spot in the 70s where they were having all those issues.
Yeah.
My understanding is those issues
That's right,
occurred
when they were switching over.
Yeah, it was manufacturers. They went from Arms Corps they were with a Filipino company or something, and they went to another company, and then Smith & Wesson 460. Smith & Wesson 460 is great. I like 44 Magnum revolvers for 2 reasons. The first is anybody who tells you want a semi-automatic modern handgun for bear protection is lying to you, and you do not listen to firearm protection with that person. Anybody here who has shot a modern firearm, specifically anything that is single, double action, or striker fired, any of it, I want you to take your Glock out. I'm going to use this as an example, or your 1911. And what I want you to do, I want you to load the magazine up, And then I want you to take that gun and I want you to take a pillow. Okay. Tape that pillow to your target. All right. And then I want you to put that target up against a piece of wood, something that, a backstop, and then press the barrel of your gun just lightly up against that pillow and try to pull the trigger and see what happens. And you know what happens? Your gun goes click and it doesn't fire. And you know why that is? Because all semi-automatic guns have a battery system. And if that is not in battery, if your slide is not in the right position, your firing pin, none of the internals of that gun can operate. So does anybody know how fast a bear runs and how quick bears move? If you are reacting,
you're gonna be.
Exactly. If you are reacting to a bear and you actually have to shoot it in the wild, it's most likely because that bear is already attacking you.
Oh, come on. Nobody needs 30 rounds.
Right. No, I want 6 because I know these 6 are going to come out of the gun. And that means if that bear is on top of you, which is most likely what the scenario is going to be because that's what bears do, and you go to use that gun and it's pressed up against that bear's body, you're dead. Period. End of story. Because if you don't get a bullet out of the end of that gun in a few seconds, you're going to be dead. Like, that's the reality. Whether it's the sound of the bullet going out of the gun that startles the bear so you have a second to reactuate and get the second round off, or whether it's that bullet ripping through the bear, which, by the way, a 44 Magnum will fucking do with ease. and anybody who wants to shoot at a fucking full-grown grizzly bear with a 10mm handgun or a 9mm handgun or a 45 or a 40 caliber handgun,
no,
good fucking luck.
Use it on yourself at that point.
you might as right. You better have a buddy that's slower than you behind you, otherwise you're fucked. Like, you might be able to, while the bear's eating him, you might be able to hit it enough for it to do some damage. But I mean, you can look up videos of people killing bears with 9mm. It is possible in an emergency to do it.
Dude, it doesn't even have to be bears. Just think about like wild hogs.
Right, exactly. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, perfect point. But
just
it's
mean
like,
little bastards.
You could put fucking 15-20 rounds into that bear and it could still have another 40-50 seconds of ripping you limb from limb. Like, that's not a good idea. You don't want to deal with it. The force that a 44 Magnum has behind it is what makes it the round that I like, because
it's all stopping power.
Yeah, it's just, you're just punching the thing with the fucking wad of metal. Like, it's the same reason why the only other gun I think is good, and I almost think is better than a 44 in context of bear protection, is a shotgun. The problem with a shotgun is they're less maneuverable. I happen to have a Mossberg Shockwave, which I think when I go hiking next, that's going to become my kind of hiking gun. Because the Shockwave with the sling, I can throw it over my back, or I can get a back scabbard for it and just have it on my back while I'm hiking. And yeah, it's in a little less of an opportune position, but if you do have to use it, you can have a little bit
with it, you're fine.
Yeah, you can have a little bit more distance in between you, and then you can have what they call bear shotgun loads, where you load buckshot slug, buckshot slug, buckshot slug. And the reason you do that is so that you can basically pepper the bear to get it to run away from you, and then the next round is the slug that's gonna blow a hole into it. All right, well, I don't want to close it out on a weird note, but we're going on like an hour and 40, and I got to cook dinner still. So.
Oh man.
Well, hey, I was actually thinking about having you guys on my show sometime here soon.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We'll
chat
on the Twitter space and figure out a time that works for all of us.
Yeah, no, it'd be cool. I did reach out to I was going to tell you, Kareem, this. I did reach out to Punk Rock Libertarians about having the two of us on together. So
yeah, because I know Otto and I know Alexander, so that'd be cool.
Yeah, and then
those guys reached out to me and was like, "Hey, do you want to come on?" And haven't heard from them since.
Oh, I went on a few days ago or a week weeks ago at this point. It was actually pretty fun. It was a good show.
Hell yeah.
I'm sure they'll hit you back up. They're just probably looking
Yeah,
for random guests.
Not
I'm
worried
always
about it.
random with finding guests too, but I do have I'm going to be on Adam Nutter's show, who's in the chat earlier. I believe that is the Porcupine I'll be on. I think we had said Thursday, but I don't think he knows. So we will see. What's the channel? Alaskan Frontier 1. I actually don't know if I subscribe to that channel. I will look though and see, because I'm curious now. Oh, okay. I'll hit this guy up. Maybe he wants to be in a podcast. He's in Alaska. That's cool. He looks like he does EDC stuff and knife stuff. That's always cool. Cool.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, we will check that out. All right. Well, thank you guys. Check out Rise to Liberty show, which is great. See us on there soon. And yeah, check out Kareem on all his social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, all that. He doesn't use Twitter because he's a nerd. And then
I'm autistic. I'm autismo. You know why I don't use Twitter? Here's a good reason. What would Uncle Ted say about using Twitter and Chat GPT? After somebody pardons him,
he'd say, "Boom." Oh no! I have no idea. I can imagine he'd have some fucking words though. All right. Take